ask yourself, are you doing the things that I just covered? Eating enough, not eating too much, and are you working on increasing your lean body mass? And if you're not, you need to be doing those things first before you start worrying about should you eat high fat or high carb.
It's Evie here. Welcome to EML Radio, where we are always talking truth. All of those things you need to hear that nobody else is willing to say.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to EML Radio. Today we're going to talk some nutrition and mainly focus on kind of clearing up some of the confusion and misunderstanding between whether you should eat a diet that is high in fat, low in carbohydrate, high in protein, low in fat and carbohydrate, high in carbohydrate and low fat, or kind of a mix in between all three. So again, before I go into details, let me just remind you guys that, worrying about what percentages of each of those three different macronutrients you are consuming is kind of like step 2 or even step 3 in proper nutrition. Because when you focus on that stuff before you focus on food quality, you're really kind of putting the cart before the horse. So let me just remind you, these recommendations that I'm going to be making to you today are based off a understanding that you are already eating a lot of different colors in every single meal. So you know my motto. We actually are in the process of trademarking the statement, colors, not calories, because I am truly on a mission to get people to start improving their overall health and develop optimal wellness through eating a variety of seasonal, wonderful, nature-provided food and keeping it that simple. But that doesn't mean that some of you don't need to kind of take it to the next step, especially if you have specific goals or things that you're trying to accomplish. So really today, I'm going to lay out we'll just pick a couple of different kind of avatars, and I'll give you examples of what would be optimal for each of those different lifestyles. Okay? So let's just start by saying, first and foremost, you got to remember that the two most important factors in weight loss and creating optimal wellness are going to be hormone balance and gut health. So that's why it's really important to start laying the groundwork with eating colorful, bright foods, right, at every single meal. And if you don't do that now, start with just basic principle, 3 colors at every single meal, and stay away from bland colored foods, whites, beiges, right? Those things are typically not things that we need to be consuming. And then move into, okay, let's shoot for 4 or 5 colors in every meal, so that at the end of the day, you are getting a wide variety of macronutrients, but then most importantly, you're getting a wide variety of micronutrients. Because I've told you in the past, right? Micronutrient deficiency is, according to the World Health Organization, the number 1 health issue in the world. Okay? So start there. But how do you know if you should be putting higher levels of protein and fat in your diet and lower carbs, or if you should be kind of doing the opposite, where you go, well, higher carbohydrate and then lower fat? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on what your activity level is like. It depends on your gut health and your hormone balance. And it really depends on what have you done if you're now like in your 40s, 50s, 60s. What have you done over your lifetime to either negatively or positively impact your metabolism? because that is a huge factor, and why most people, especially gals that are 40 and over, their metabolism is shut way down. They are struggling to lose weight no matter what they do, right? I get you. Like, you're my jam. Believe me, in over, 10, 12 years of coaching, those are the people I was able to help the most, because the reality is, for most women over 40, like, I'm speaking your language, right? That is probably you. And we're going to cover why that is and what you're going to do about it. Okay. So let's just start with basic understanding of what your metabolism is. I like to keep it just really simple. Yes, like functionally within the body, it's the system that converts food into energy. But I like to give this visual to you. It's like your fire. Right? You've got this nice little kindling, stacked, wood burning fire in you. Right? It keeps you warm, right? It gives you energy. So the goal is that we want to have this nicely stoked fire or metabolism. Right? That helps us keep burning all day long, keeps us healthy. It keeps us from avoiding excess weight gain or storing too much body fat, right? So a good, healthy burning metabolism is a must. And the way you do that is a couple of ways. For one, you cannot starve yourself. Going into deep levels of caloric deficiency is what slows your metabolism down. So if you do all these crazy things out there like liquid diets or long periods of fasting, you are shutting your metabolism down. And think about it this way. Your body is super smart, right? Your body will do what it needs to survive. So if you are essentially starving your body by eating anywhere from, like some of these stupid liquid diets and all these other programs out there that take you down to like all the way to 700 calories a day. I know that sounds crazy, but I promise you there are hundreds of millions of people out there that have done this or are still currently doing it. What happens is your body is basically like in a starvation state. So think about it this way. Is your body going to build a big flaming fire when it only has 700 calories a day? Of course not. What's it going to do? It's going to shut that fire down. So now you have this low burning fire, and your body in return is going to store body fat from it. So picture your metabolism as that fire, and we want to stoke it. So how we stoke it is making sure that we're eating good quality, healthy food and adequate amounts of it. So we won't go too deep on the science of what your basal metabolic rate is, but your basal metabolic rate is basically the calories that your body requires to even keep it alive every single day. And if you don't know that number, I suggest you find it out. That number is important because if you go too far below it, you're going to go into starvation. If you go too high above it in caloric intake, then you're going to store fat. So it's an important number for you to know. And then the second most important factor there is how much lean body mass do you have? And when I say lean body mass, I'm referring to how much muscle. Muscle is something I like to call expensive real estate. It is hard for your body to hold on to. So you can burn through it quickly, and it's a little bit tricky to build. You have to have the right recipe to build it. But the beautiful thing about your lean body mass is the more you have, the higher your metabolism is. So that fire, when it's full of good, think about big, heavy logs of muscle, now that fire is blazing. And that thing burns all day long. It doesn't matter if you miss a meal. It doesn't matter if you overdo it on vacation for a week. When you have a solid base of lean body mass, now you've got a really high functioning metabolism. That's what we want to focus on. So just in that, ask yourself, are you doing the things that I just covered? Eating enough, not eating too much, and are you working on increasing your lean body mass? And if you're not, you need to be doing those things first before you start worrying about should you eat high fat or high carb. So that's step one. Now let's break it down. A lot of different individuals, depending on what they're trying to accomplish, will benefit from a, let's just go high fat, higher protein, and lower carbohydrate diet. So if you are male in your 20s, 30s, good on you, because you have so much more metabolic flexibility than the rest of us. That's just a fact. Something to point out there too. Males versus females. Like, ladies, I'm sorry, everybody's always complaining how much easier it is for men to lose weight than it is women. Well, get over it. Our bodies were designed to bear children. We therefore will always carry higher levels of body fat. Like, it is what it is. So if you're glad that you have the ability, or that your body was built to bear children, well, tough. Like, that's just the trade-off. You've got higher body fat levels, and you've got more sensitive hormone. So men can get away with a lot more than us women can. It just is what it is. So get over it. If you're in your 20s, male, you pretty much could go really high fat, high protein, low carbohydrate, and you're going to lean out like nobody's business. Where you get into trouble is when you start adding too much physical exercise to that eating protocol. So if you're highly active, whether you're male or female, you got to make sure that you have enough carbohydrate for you to actually replenish your muscle glycogen and actually have enough energy, right? When you short your body of carbohydrates, when you're really active, you're going to run into problems, and you're going to completely tax your adrenal system and your endocrine system. So just leave it at that. Females, 20s, 30s, yeah, you probably have more flexibility than those of us that are in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, but you're still going to naturally carry higher levels of body fat. And if you want to eat higher carb and low fat, you're probably going to see results from it, but you're probably going to have to be darn active if you're going to go that route. Because we've talked about it in the past when I talked about, what is the kind of carb sweet spot and when you should eat carbohydrates throughout the day. Whether you're in your 20s or 30s or not, if you're just sitting around all day long, eating a high carbohydrate diet and focusing on low fat, you probably aren't going to see results. And if you do, keep in mind that most foods that are low fat really mean low taste, completely stripped of all of their vital nutrients and replaced with fillers. Okay? Because if you take all that good healthy fat out of food, you have to replace it with something. And unfortunately, most food companies have just replaced that with sugar. Okay? So be careful about going too high carb. Let's take another avatar. Let's take your male, high stress and sedentary. There's lots of you guys out there. Regardless of age, there are a lot of males that are working tremendous numbers of hours. They've got stress at home with wife, family, kids, a lot of financial responsibility. You're under high levels of stress and you don't make time. Notice I said you don't make time. I didn't say you don't have time. You don't make time to exercise. For you, a beautiful place to be to try to help improve your health and lose that excess weight or body fat is for you to be going high fat, moderate levels of protein, and very little carb. That is where, like, the ketogenic diet works for a lot of guys. Now, keto has a lot of issues that I just don't agree with, and it does have a lot of negative implications, especially for gals down the road and over 40. But for you guys that are really sedentary, you sit most of the day and you have a whole lot of stress, you need that fat. You need good, healthy animal fat, natural occurring fats like olive oils, avocado oils, seeds, nuts, fatty meats. That's great for you, and it keeps your hormones balanced as well. and adequate protein so that you keep that muscle on, right? How you keep muscle or how you grow muscle is by eating protein. That's it. And you don't need a lot of carbohydrate because you're not active. You don't need a lot of energy because you're not expending a lot of energy. So that's a beautiful place for males. Let me repeat that. Males, not very active, higher stress, or even lower stress, right? You can get away with high levels of fat and protein and very little carb. Think more along the keto lines. But when I say that, keep in mind that's all building from the base of actual real food. Right? I would never encourage anybody, and this is why I take issue with like the ketogenic diet, is because most people do it in a very flawed, unhealthy way. They eat pounds of bacon and red meat, and they're not getting grass-fed beef or anything that is a good quality source. And they're not eating any kind of vegetables. Yeah, that's keto, but that's a really ugly version of keto. Keto done properly, now I'm talking to males, not females. You're a whole nother topic. Keto done properly is lots of green, leafy vegetables, broccolis, Brussels sprouts, cauliflowers, right? You name it, lots of vegetables, and then high fat and high protein along with it, and no starches. Simple. Right? Since we're talking keto, now let's talk about women with that same demographic. Okay, so now we're talking females, high stress, very low exercise, right? You're really sedentary. You either sit all day at home or you sit all day at the office. You just don't move much, which I will tell you is the vast majority of people out there. This is exactly why we have 45% obesity rates. Right? So if you're this female, the last thing you want to do is go onto a really high fat, high protein diet with very little carbohydrate. Now, hold on. Now stay with me here. Because most of you females that are overly fat, that are over age 40, have a long history of yo-yo dieting. You're 40 now. You've probably had a couple of kids. If you haven't, you've built your career. Wherever life has taken you, you have probably fallen prey to a lot of different diets out there. And let's go back to your metabolism. What happens when you are constantly yo-yo dieting or you've tried every different program out there only to gain weight back is every single time you did that, you starved your body, you shut your metabolism down a little bit. You ate a bunch of food again, gained weight, now you have a lower metabolism, right? You're not as able and equipped to have a burning fire to get rid of those excess calories. So then what happens? You go on a diet again. You go on that diet, you slow your metabolism down even further because your body's kind of your body's onto you at this point, right? Your body's going like, this chick starves me about every 6 months. So I got to make sure that I am not going to burn through all the food she's giving me right now. Get that? So you're putting that fire out over and over and over again. And I've seen gals, man, like your metabolism is just barely burning. So let's picture that. Keep that image of a fire burning in your mind. You've got this very low, kind of snuffed out metabolism. Right? And you've probably, to compound that, you probably have very little lean body mass because you're afraid to weight train or you don't do any kind of heavy weight training. Lean mass comes from heavy weight training, like taking your reps to failure. It doesn't happen from booty bar and just bearing your own weight. That is not weight training. That's resistance against your own body, right? So you've yo-yo dieted, you've slowed your metabolism, compound that with the fact that you probably don't have very much lean tissue on your body, and you've done excessive amounts of cardio. Cardio with no calories on board, all that means is going catabolic. It means your body is going to burn through its muscle first because that's hard to keep on, right? It's expensive real estate. So you cut your calories, you do excessive cardio training, and what happens is you may lose weight initially, but then you just plateau out, and then you gain weight as soon as you fall off that exercise program. So most gals in their 40s, that's the problem. But it doesn't mean that it's not solvable. It's just that you can't expect as much as someone that's say 20 or 30, or you can't expect as much as even your husband that may piss you off when he loses weight quicker than you do. But you have to kind of own that. You've done that to your own body. Your body doesn't hate you. Your body has only been trained to do what you've trained it to do. And that means hold on to calories because you freaking starved it. So what do you do in that instance? Let's look at if that female now with this little tiny burning fire that's barely glowing, she dumps on a bunch of fat and a bunch of protein. Just think about what protein and fats look like. They're heavy, right? They're dense. They are harder and they take more work for your body to metabolize and break down. Versus carbohydrates, which are lighter and more easily accessible. The uptake on them is a lot quicker. They're broken down quicker. So when this female that has barely any metabolism fire kind of burning there, she snuffs that fire out by dumping a bunch of protein and fat on top of it. So your body can't break it down, and you again don't see any results. But that's why that female is actually going to be better off with a little higher carbohydrate and not quite so heavy on the fat and the protein. And you guys, like, this is just on a podcast. Like, I'm like, you can dig deep and find out the answers on, okay, exactly how much do I need? And my company can help you do that, right? But for information's sake, I just want you to start looking at yourself. And if you fall into one of those categories, the last thing you need to be doing as a female over 40, overly fat, that's yo-yo dieted, the last fucking thing you need to do is keto. Right? You're snuffing out a fire that's barely burning as it is. And I'm really going to hammer that one home because that is the vast majority of my audience, right? Those are my followers, right? I get you. I'm 47. While I'm on that, let me kind of explain to you what's happened to me over the years in eating low fat, high fat, and everything in between. I was really skinny when I was a kid. I had very poor nutrition habits. I ate everything, just frozen pizzas, McDonald's, you name it. It's what I grew up on. I didn't know any better. Got into my late 20s and tried a ton of different diets out there because now I was married and I was working and I wasn't staying as skinny as I always had. I had to work for it. So I did everything. I can remember is like at one point I went like on a strict bagel diet where all I ate was bagels for every day, like 3 bagels a day for like, I have no fucking clue what I was doing, right? I was like, I think probably like mid 20s, early 20s actually. It was right after I got married. I giggle about it now because can you even imagine trying to take a shit after you only ate bagels for a week straight? God, and then I wondered why I ended up with irritable bowel syndrome and constipation. Hello, dumbass. Pretty funny to think back on. But anyway, I've tried every diet out there. And when I was 27, had my first child, my daughter passed away. We all kind of know that story. And I dove deep into fitness and learning, and I just love to work out because it kept me sane. And when I was doing that, I really was kind of just doing a little bit of everything as far as my diet. And I would probably say I was more on the low fat side because I'm a child of the 80s, right? So that's when we all know is like, oh, be afraid of fat because fat makes you fat. Well, it did help me lose weight initially. But what happened, and as if you look back at like any of my social media, you can see pictures on there. When I was in my late 20s and early 30s, I was skinny, but I was skinny fat. So I had really high levels of body fat, but I wore a small size. But we all know like that stuff doesn't look great. And that stuff isn't what makes you resilient. And then I got into doing CrossFit in my mid 30s and I learned how to weight train and it started to completely transform my body. And I shifted from really not knowing what I was doing as far as food into a really strict paleo diet. So paleo would be almost kind of comparable. Paleo would fall in line with someone that was going to eat ketogenically, right? Or if that was their goal. So it's high fat, high protein, just not eating anything processed, basically. So it actually is something I pretty much still adhere to to this day, except I really incorporate a lot of green leafy vegetables and tubers and some natural occurring carbohydrates. So anyway, I got really deep into CrossFit and I was eating a really strict primal diet. But let's think about that. A really strict primal or paleo diet has very little carbs in it. And I looked freaking great. I'm not gonna lie. I looked like the bomb. I was super lean, but I really wasn't feeling very good. I had absolutely no sex drive. I mean, none. If I never had sex again, I wouldn't care, right? I was starting to get a little bit weaker and I was always tired. And so thankfully I reached out to the right people and got the right help. And for me, because I was so highly active with no carbohydrates, I was completely destroying my hormones, destroying them. Because keep in mind now, that's why I didn't have any sex drive either, because I didn't have enough energy sources from carbohydrate. So my body was just stealing all of my sex hormones in order to even stay alive, for my cortisol and other fight or flight hormones. So that's kind of a deeper topic that I want to get into today, but I want to share that with you that, at different stages of my life, different things have worked. So when I was still staying active and highly competitive in CrossFit, I needed a lot of carbs, right? I ate a really high carbohydrate diet. And in order to not eat way too many calories, I pulled my fat back. And that allowed me to perform really well, to recover really well, and not store excess body fat from too many calories. But two years ago, I had a lot of life changes. I stopped competing and I had shoulder surgery. And at that point, I probably had about nine, maybe 10 at most body fat. So I had my surgery. A lot of stress went with that, a lot of lifestyle changes as well. So it's not all just the surgery and stopping competing. But what happened is I had been eating such a low fat diet that I was really jacking up my hormones, because we need adequate fat intake in order to have hormone balance. So what happened is I looked lean and I was fueling for my sport, but I'm not kidding you guys. The minute I stopped competing and working out at that high level, I just gained an unbelievably huge amount of body fat. It was mortifying. I'm like, what the fuck just happened to my body? And it was all like in my belly region, just horrible. And I already have a really high level of lean mass. So when you start putting some fat layers over a lot of muscle, that's just not a good look. And I've been digging myself out of it for 2 years now, and it hasn't been easy. But the reason I'm sharing that with you is because anytime you go to those extremes, I went to an extreme of I was eating less than 30 grams of fat per day, really high carb, and I tracked my macros. It was working at the time, but again, ladies, we have very sensitive hormones. And the second I changed my output, my body just was a mess. My hormones were all jacked up and I gained a lot of body fat. And so now I'm working to correct that. So you can see that there's a lot of different factors that go into whether or not you eat a lot of fat or a lot of carbohydrate. And it really depends on your activity level and your underlying metabolism. Just checking my notes here because I want to make sure that I didn't forget anything. Okay, yes, so we're going to kind of wrap things up there. So you may be going, well, shit, that's me. Like, no matter what I do right now, I can't seem to lose weight. I've tried everything and nothing's working. You are most likely in a position where we need to do what's called reverse dieting. And you may have heard it, and this is really hard for people to wrap their minds around. You have damaged your metabolism over decades. You have slowly snuffed out that fire. So in order for you to boost your metabolism, you have to eat to where your body is like, okay, good quality food. Now, this does not come from freaking Doritos and Twizzlers, right? I'm talking good quality food. You eat beautiful, colorful food. You eat high quality animal protein and animal and naturally occurring fats, not vegetable oils and all these other kind of manufactured oils. You eat real food, and you eat about 10% higher than your basal metabolic rate, because you've got to let your body realize that you're not going to starve it anymore. So ask anybody that's ever worked with me. It freaks them out. I'm like, this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to eat more than you've been eating before. And we're going to make sure it's the right food so that you build your metabolism, and in turn, your body will start to release some of those fat stores. So you do not want a bunch of those calories coming from high levels of fat and high levels of protein. I didn't think about whether or not I was actually going to give a number, and I hate to do that because it's too broad of an audience to give numbers, right? But a very good starting place for everybody is protein that is equal to your lean body mass in grams per day. So I have a lean body mass of about 128 to 132 pounds. That's just my lean tissue, guys. I weigh a lot. I weighed a lot even when I had 9% body fat. I was upwards of, like 155, 150 pounds, anywhere between there. But very low body fat because I have a lot of muscle. So your lean body mass is what's going to dictate how much protein you need to intake. And I can tell you almost 100% of females that have ever sat in front of me or in a room with me over 10 years are not eating even close to enough protein. So lean body mass in protein in grams per day. And then from there, what you do, and this is for guys and gals, just a really good baseline, is play around with how you respond to eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. Careful of the citrus fruits and things like pineapple and mango and all those things, because they're basically just sugar. Play around with your carbohydrate and your fats. Right? Baseline adequate protein. Go a little higher carbohydrate if you know for a fact you are the female that I just described, right? Yo-yo dieter, slow metabolism. Right? Start with a little higher carbohydrate and less fat and see how you feel. Look at your bowel movements. Are they regular? Are you 1 to 2 times a day with a solid stool that's easy to pass, right? Those are the kind of things that you can look at and see if what you are doing for your diet is working for you. And if that's not working, then what you want to do is shift a little bit the other way. Go a little bit higher fat and cut your carbohydrates down just a little bit, right? And see what happens to your body and how you feel in response to that. Because here's the truth, guys, there is not a one size fits all when it comes to nutrition. Think about, there's a lot of brilliant people in the world that have been studying nutrition for lifetimes, right? And they still don't have all of the right answers. So I surely do not have all the answers for you. I have some really good practical real world advice and a lot of advice that I've drawn from working with hundreds of people over the past 10, 12, 15 years. So baseline protein equivalent to your lean body mass. One thing you have to watch out for there is if you have kidney issues, make sure you consult your doctor. Don't just be listening to me about how much protein is okay for you, because that's something that's really tricky. You definitely don't want to overdo the protein if you have poor kidneys, poor kidney function. Okay? And then play around with it and refer back to this and see where you fall in the different avatars that I laid out and take it from there. Okay? Hopefully that was helpful for you guys today. And if you want more kind of deeper conversations on any of these topics that we discussed today, please send me a message. I would love to hear from you because I want to make sure that I'm helping you with the things that you really need the most help with. Okay? So before we go, I'm going to leave you with one last truth, and that is you are your own best advocate when it comes to knowing what your body needs for fuel. And what I mean by that is your neighbor, the gal you work with, sister who lost weight doing keto or intermittent fasting, or guys that, You know a guy that went on some, protein shake regimen and lost 40 pounds. Tune that shit out. What worked for one person does not mean it's going to work for you. And keep in mind, the only people that are sharing their stories, they're only sharing the one thing that they did that happened to work. You're not hearing about the 10, 20, 30 other things they've done over the last 3 decades that didn't work. Keep nutrition simple. Eat real food in adequate amounts for you to feel good. Do not starve your body. Do not yo-yo diet, and eat for enjoyment of life and having mental clarity, mental acuity, feeling happy, wanting to move your body instead of being exhausted, instead of starving yourself and constantly focusing on being on a diet. Thanks for tuning in today, guys. If you like this one, head on over to the next video up, or the next episode up, which is on the calories in, calories out, and debunking that myth with Dr. TJ Williams. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.